Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell, and this is News and Views from the Nefarium for Thursday, October 24th in the year 2013, the year beyond Thunderdome, the weeks after the dummy crooks and Republic thugs intransigently put the whole country into a tailspin and most of the rest of the world. And that's kind of partly the backdrop that I want you to bear in mind in today's news and views. And I'm not even making any announcements, as is my custom this week, because I need to get right into it. I want you to bear in mind in my remarks that there is a context for them. The context here are two stories in particular that I want you to bear in mind. The first is the story that we've seen that Saudi Arabia is displeased with the United States and is making noises that it's moving out of the American orbit. Now, the story in the American media has been portrayed that Saudi Arabia is very displeased with the USA's inability to orchestrate an intervention into Syria. Now, for all of you wondering why the United States is supporting radical Islamic jihadists that are going around killing Syrian population, Christians in particular, it's partly for the reason that Saudi Arabia has been one of the backers. But the bigger story behind Saudi Arabia's displeasure is that this last week, China surpassed the United States as the world's largest importer of petroleum. And this means that China, and in particular the BRICS nations, are going to be moving gradually to increase their influence in the Middle East. This is why President Putin of Russia was so adamantly opposed to any Western intervention in Syria that he tried to get things into the UN, and he was successful in staving off any move to intervention, at least for the moment. But this is the bigger story in the background. This now means that, like it or not, the West and the BRICS nations are on a bit of a collision course regarding the Middle East. Now, the other story lurking in the background is that also in this past week, the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have completed the backbone structure, so to speak, for their independent internet free of American influence. They've constructed the gateways and so on and so forth to make that possible. And it's a gateway stretching from Brazil to South Africa to certain gateways in India, then up through China, and then Vladivostok over on the extreme eastern end of the Russian Federation. So these are the two things going on in the background. Now, my thesis in presenting what I'm going to talk about today, there's two articles I want to focus on. My thesis is the adage, never let a good crisis go to waste. And in this case, the crisis is the declining trust within the world, and in particular within the Western Bloc, in the United States as an ally, number one, and number two, in the financial solidity, in the financial trustability, if you will, of the United States and the US dollar. These are the two things that are now under major assault. And the story I want to lead off with is the recent telephone call that Chancellor Angela Merkel of Germany made to President Obama regarding the NSA's spying scandal. And it's the NSA Snowden affair that is the crisis, or the crisis of opportunity now for nations to seize and to change or make adjustments in the geopolitical structure of the world. And that's underway. And the significance of Angela Merkel's call, I don't think, can be overestimated, and for reasons that I think this article kind of hints at. This article comes from a German news site, and I'm quoting now the statements of Chancellor Merkel's press officer, Stefan Seibert, all right? And in the statement, Mr. Seibert says this, quote, the Chancellor telephoned President Barack Obama and made clear that she unequivocally disapproves of such practices should they be confirmed and regards them as completely unacceptable. Merkel had demanded, quote, an immediate and comprehensive explanation from Washington, Seibert added. The statement said that, quote, among close friends and partners as the Federal Republic of Germany and the U.S. have been for decades, there should be no such monitoring of the communications of a head of government. This would be a serious breach of trust. Such practices must be stopped immediately, unquote, the Chancellor told Obama. The evidence for Merkel's mobile phone being targeted came from Der Spiegel, which has broken a series of stories about mass surveillance by the National Security Agency. The evidence has also been viewed by the German security services and was regarded as plausible enough to warrant a call to Obama, unquote. Now, let's look at that statement very closely. The two German security services that are probably the ones that briefed Chancellor Merkel would be the Bundesnachrichtendienst, their version of the CIA, and the Bundesverfassungsamt or the Bundeskriminalamt, one of those two services, which are more or less the domestic internal security in the Federal Republic of Germany. Now, the reason I'm focusing on that is that we all know that the great powers of the world spy on each other. The idea that France or Britain doesn't spy on us, or that they don't spy on Russia and so on, or that the Germans don't spy on people, this is nonsense. What's really going on here is the crisis of opportunity is being seized because of the extent of American spying, I think, and because of the perception that America has overstepped treaty obligations, and I'll get to those in a moment. What we're being told in that comment, that statement, that the German security services briefed the Chancellor is really this, that they have probably top secret information and evidence to the effect that this has taken place, and they immediately informed the Chancellor, and that's what provoked the phone call. Now, folks, I want you to understand that prior to the reunification of Germany, Germany was more or less a satrapy, a satellite, a puppet state of the United States. Since the reunification, Germany is still very much locked into a relationship with the United States, but it has changed simply because of the preponderance now of power that has reaccreted to Germany in its traditional role as the central major power in Europe. And as a result of that, as I've been pointing out in various blogs and talks, it's begun to revert to its traditional diplomatic pattern of playing off the West and the East and trying to play a balance of power game between the two. That's always been traditional German diplomacy since the era of Frederick the Great and the rise of Prussia. So we're seeing Germany revert to that pattern. But more importantly, I want you to look at the fact that these are some of the strongest words a German chancellor has addressed to the United States since World War II. All right, that's very, very significant. And it heralds, I believe, a use of this NSA as an opportunity to begin a more long-range, much quieter, very deliberate process of pulling away from American influence and a realignment with the BRICS nations. And I think you're going to see this spread to the rest of Europe because, as I pointed out before, the United Kingdom has already made bilateral currency swap agreements with China. I believe that these are going to be expanded to Russia and India as well. So in other words, Europe is going to negotiate either individually by nation state to nation state or on the part of the whole European such bilateral agreements. The reason for this, I believe, is that this is another signal that there may be some very serious factional infighting going on in the so-called New World Order, or as I've been calling it, the Western Bloc, the Anglosphere, the Anglo-American corporate elite, or what have you. I believe that this is a powerful signal that we're seeing this infighting and the fissures are growing, the cracks are growing, because America has lost the geopolitical confidence of its allies and it's lost the financial confidence of the world. This is only going to increase. Now, as a kind of testament of this analysis or corroborative indicator that this analysis may be on the right track, we have another article from RT, from Russia Today, that appeared just yesterday. That is, and the title says it all, EU Parliament votes to suspend US from financial data bank to avoid spying. And here it comes, folks. I've been saying, pardon me, all along that the real problem of the NSA spying is that it has nothing whatsoever to do with the war on terror. It's about finances. Now, obviously, the ability to track financial transfers and so on are of value in waging a war on terror. All right? I'm not disputing that point. I'm simply saying that there was another agenda hidden behind it that was piggybacked into the war on terror agenda, and it was strictly and solely financial. I've been arguing, following the suggestion of Secretary Catherine Austin Fitts, that the NSA data mining operation is the ultimate in the insider trader mechanism, and it's also a mechanism designed to prop up the American position in international clearing and in monitoring international financial transfer. That data would give anyone possessing it an enormous, a huge advantage in the world marketplace, particularly in a world where financial transactions are increasingly electronic and increasingly subject to high frequency or algorithmic trading and so on. All right. Now, the Russian article says this, quote, EU lawmakers are concerned that the U.S. is covertly using information from SWIFT, that's the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Transfer, or in some versions of the acronym, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. That's the International Clearinghouse headquartered in Brussels. That handles all transactions in and out of Europe, basically. So in other words, EU lawmakers are concerned that the U.S. is covertly using information from the SWIFT database following leaked U.S. documents aired by Brazil's biggest television network, Globo, which indicated that the U.S. has secretly tapped into SWIFT. Now, pause and consider that, because the whole call for an independent internet began in Brazil, and it's now spread to Europe. In other words, Europe is citing the Brazilian precedent for its own actions in limiting the NSA's access to SWIFT. The Russian article continues, under current agreements, the U.S. has limited access to the SWIFT database. The deal is part of the transatlantic cooperation following the September 2001 attacks and allows certain data from SWIFT to be shared with the U.S. Treasury, unquote. Now, I am suggesting here that you connect the dots. I'm suggesting that Merkel's phone call is deeply related to this story, that the European Parliament is voting to suspend and limit American access to SWIFT. And that's breathtaking, folks, because that means whether the European Parliament has the power to enforce that is probably up in the air. But I do suspect that what it really is telling us, that Europe is signaling via the European Parliament that they're just about up to here with American spying. So I'm going to suggest a historical perspective from which to understand this. And that perspective, I wrote recently, of course, the book, The Financial Vipers of Venice. And I did so for the reason that I wanted people to understand Venetian institutions, which we see paralleled now in a major and dramatic fashion in the United States, with secret courts, with the ability of the National Security Council and other presidential commissions to literally order assassinations on individuals without due process of law, including American citizens. This was in the recent National Defense Authorization Act. So in other words, we're seeing Venetian institutions crop up now in the United States. And the other thing that I wrote the book was to show people how a financial oligarchy operates in practice. And we're seeing evidence of that. At a certain point in history, these practices managed to antagonize all of Europe. And they organized themselves into a league. It was called the League of Cambrai, and they actually went to war, all of Europe essentially, France, Austria, Spain, and so on, and the papacy, against the Republic of Venice, because literally they had had it with this type of behavior, and the complete lack of trust. Now, Venice survived that war. It was really the first general European war. Venice survived that war, but it took a strategic decision, which I get into in the book. But I'm suggesting by that historical parallel that the Western Bloc, the Anglosphere, the Anglo-American financial oligarchs, are in now a position where it's a war of the League of Cambrai moment. And it's the American component that is under assault geopolitically and financially. Never let a good crisis go to waste. And the NSA spying crisis is now being used to realign and reshape traditional geopolitical alliances and arrangements. And I'm suggesting something else. This means, in my opinion, that we're seeing perhaps more evidence of that factional infighting within what people are calling the New World Order, that I've been trying to caution people about since Covert Wars and Breakaway Civilizations came out, that you're looking at a mafia-like structure. You're not looking at a comprehensive, all-powerful, omnipotent conspiracy being run out of London and Wall Street. They have their own factional interests, and now you're seeing the cracks between the European component of that Anglosphere, that New World Order, whatever you wish to call it, and the American one. And it's the American one that is under severe pressure geopolitically and financially and assault. What this means, I think, is you're going to see Germany and Europe begin to play a quiet, slow, deliberate game now of back and forth between the BRICS bloc and the USA. But the long-term goal, I think now it's safe to say, is probably a move of Europe out of the Anglosphere, out of the American sphere of influence, and toward a more independent European course of action. I think you're going to see that effort being led by one of the four major European powers, either Spain or Italy or France, Germany, or I should have said five, or Great Britain. I think that move is going to be signaled by those five countries in particular in their own individual ways, but it's all going to be part of a much larger process of reorienting things. So lots of news going on this week. Watch these stories carefully, particularly the story about SWIFT, because I've been predicting that the BRICS nations are going to have their own independent international financial clearing in order to make their block work. And I think that's going to be the next step that we'll see. Anyway, that's it for news and views from the Nefarium for this week. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. God bless, and I'll see you on the flip side.